The World War III thing is kind of another one of my pet peeves. And again, I really focus a lot on media coverage because it bothers me, and both sides do this. But I feel like, and look, we're here on YouTube. If we did a title of a video, "Are you afraid of World War III?" It's going to get more clicks. And I
That's
get
that's what we should call this one, even though we didn't
no.
talk about it till the end.
Well, we'll break off a chunk here. We'll do a little clip. But no, I'm just thinking like, you know how wars are now fought. There's a reason we haven't had World War III, and World War II ended 80 years ago. And we dropped the nukes, and I think everybody realized what could happen if that happens again. And then even the way wars are fought now, you know, as you mentioned, neither side, Democrats or Republicans in the United States, want our troops anywhere near these places. Now there's a divide about, hey, should we fund some of these wars? I'm fine with helping our allies and funding them. It's a totally different story to me about putting our troops in harm's way. I do think that the World War III nuclear war, oh, we should be scared. I think that gets played up all the time. It got played up with Russia and Ukraine. It's getting played up now. It'll get played up the next time something happens. But I think it's very important to note, as we always talk about how this impacts the election. All these things are bad for Biden, and it's a win for Trump because it's fair. It's a fair narrative to say things felt calmer under Trump. Now, I understand we were in Afghanistan the whole time still. That had calmed down. Some people, some troops still died over those 4 years. But just from a general narrative standpoint, it is absolutely fair to say, you know what? It seemed like the world and the axis of evil, they were kept in check a little better under Donald Trump. The world does seem to be more on fire, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, and now Israel and Hamas. The world seems to be more on fire under Biden. Is that because he's weak and he's old and he's feeble? I think that's a very fair argument to make, and it's a compelling argument. So anytime things happen overseas in foreign policy, and we keep seeing more things happen, I think, again, you don't want to say win loss, but it's in the win column for Trump in terms of the election.
Yeah, look, it's such a complicated question because we'll never know, right? It's not like we can run a simulation where what if Donald Trump had been reelected? Does Russia go into Ukraine? Does the same thing happen with Hamas and Israel on October 7th? Who knows, right? I mean, look, the reason that some people speculate that Hamas did what they did is because Saudi Arabia was getting close to a long-term normalization of relations with Israel, which would have been an historic event in the Middle East to have one of the biggest, most powerful Arab countries in that region fully recognize and have diplomatic relations with a Jewish state. It would have been unprecedented. And I think that still will happen someday. But that was what Trump was trying to do as well. I mean, you had the Abraham Accords under Trump, where some of the smaller Arab countries made a lasting peace with Israel. So Trump, we know, was pushing Saudi Arabia for that as well. So would it have happened? Who knows, right? Uh, But the point is, we are where we are now. And for Biden now, I think the worst case scenario is what we mentioned is that Israel and Iran, something happens there where we feel like we have to come into an open conflict in the Middle East. If he can avoid that and Israel can finish up their operations in Gaza with Hamas no longer around, maybe the hostages are freed somehow. That's kind of the best case scenario, I think, for Biden heading into the election. But I think no matter who the president is, no matter what would have happened in an alternate reality, at some point, Russia, Iran, and China we're all going to test, and still probably will in the future, kind of the international order that we've established, that we have led as America. That was going to happen, no matter how elections turn out. And these countries are working more and more in a coordinated way. Russia, after all the sanctions that were imposed on it with Ukraine, all the American companies pulled out, many of them, and Russia turned to China. And that's what's kept Russia afloat is China has brought in all of these exports into Russia to replace what they lost from America, and Russia's selling them oil, and they've become closer and closer. Same thing with Iran selling oil to China. And I think one of the big developments this week to kind of tie this all together is that not only were we successful in helping Israel defend itself against the attack from Iran, which I think sent a big message, but also finally it looks like the House this weekend is going to pass aid for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. Exactly the areas we're talking about. Because we the key my phrase today is binary choice, right? You'd be dead if you played a drinking game where I've said that. You had to drink every time I said that this show. But in foreign policy, it's not a binary choice between either America retreats and does nothing and just lets the world go as it is, or we send our troops all over the world to fight and die. Like those are not the only two options, and neither of them are good options. There is the middle option, which is the appropriate one, which is we use our power and influence to help our allies and contain our adversaries. And Russia and China and Iran are not going to stop. They're not going to stop if Donald Trump is president. They may change their tactics, they may do things differently, but the fight of our time is free nations led by America and others versus totalitarian regimes led by China and Russia and Iran. That is it. That is the game we are in. And so I think the best development this week is finally Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is going to put this bill on the floor. It's going to pass. And Ukraine, especially, who's suffered some setbacks recently because they're literally running out of bullets, is going to get aid. Israel's going to get aid. Taiwan's going to get aid because pulling away from the world and letting Putin have Ukraine and letting Iran do what they want and letting China take Taiwan is absolutely the opposite of what we should be doing. So I've been hard on Speaker Johnson before, and I've said, the Republicans are in chaos, which I think they are. But I want to give him credit because after a rocky start, he is starting to find his rhythm. And he passed a government funding bill that, avoided a government shutdown. And now it looks like he's going to pass this despite a threat to have the chair vacated, which essentially would mean he would lose his job and the House wouldn't have a speaker anymore. That may happen. That may happen this weekend. And he knows that, and he's doing this anyway. And so I want to give Johnson credit because I've been critical of him before for having the cojones to look down, to stare the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world in the face and say, you know what? No, I'm going to do what I think is right and let the chips fall where they may, which is what he said yesterday. And I just want to read this quote from Johnson because I thought this was so good. He said this yesterday. He said, "This is a critical time right now, a critical time on the world stage. I can make a selfish decision and do something that's different, but I'm doing here what I believe to be the right thing. I think providing lethal aid to Ukraine right now is critically important. I really do. I really do believe the intel and the briefings that we've gotten. I believe that Xi of China, Vladimir Putin, and Iran are really an axis of evil. I think they're in coordination on it." And he's right. And if you don't respond in Ukraine and you let Putin win, what message do you send to Iran? What message do you send to China? And so I give Mike Johnson a lot of props because he's risking his job to do the right thing. And we don't see that a lot in politics anymore. We sure as hell don't see it much in the Republican Party. So kudos to him.